Hello, hello. Did that fix the problem? I think that I think the problem is that I didn't have my my input active. I was just sharing the screen. I think it's working now though. Yeah, it's working now. So great. I've been talking to myself for 49 minutes. Man, I was making some great points too. At least I think they were. Well, all right. I guess I'll kind of repeat some of the things I was talking about. I think so. I guess it might have been off the entire time. Let me see. Let me see if I can cycle back. Let me see. Yep, it's been off the whole time. Oops. Well, thanks for letting me know that. I'm glad you told me. All right. Okay. All right. Well, hi everybody. Since I didn't say good morning, since I didn't say good afternoon, and I didn't say good evening wherever you are, I'll just kind of start over here. So I'm working today. I'm continuing the illustration from last night. And right now, I'm just going step by step. I did add color to Sarah here last night because I just couldn't stop working on this. And right now, I'm creating this kind of cloud burst that's going to create the effect that this hospital bed has just transformed into a plane. And let's see, some of the things I was saying is that this is an important aspect of defining the Dream Girl's character, because when you have when you have character posings and expressions that are done a certain way, that's obviously that all conveys the character. But there's another series of ways that you can get a sense of who characters are, and that one way would be for them to show how they react to the environment around them and what's occurring. And the Dream Girl is very confident. She's not really moved to any great extent by what's happening, because to her it's the most natural thing in the world that this would be occurring. So this hospital bed turning into a plane, I mean, of course, that's just what would happen. And that's sort of the feeling that I want you to get from her expression. It's just this accepting, naturally this is going to occur. And what that does for her character is it explains that she is sort of in charge. She understands what's happening. She's not easily moved, or she's not surprised. Sarah, on the other hand, is. By her arm expression. So having the character react to the environment in that way is kind of a key part of defining their character in sort of these secondary ways that might not be quite so obvious. All right, now I've got I want to make this a bit more like a bit of a hotter burst of light, but I'm still going to use blue. So since I did this smoke on a separate, this kind of illumination on a separate layer from the smoke layer itself, I can isolate it by turning on an alpha lock. So any adjustments that I make to it will only affect the light. So what's kind of cool is I can create in the middle, I can create a color gradient. So it's kind of purple on the outside and it's blue on the inside. And I can gradually turn up the heat on this so that it gets a little bit more intense. So I'll go even a bit toward green. Maybe get some of those green tones in there. I might even, let me just see what happens if I go red with this. I don't think I want a full gradient in the smoke at this point. Might leave it off at yellow at the hottest. But by doing these kind of unusual colors for the smoke, it creates this impression that this is a kind of a, this isn't like your typical smoke exhaust from something. This is clearly a magical event that's occurring. So picking your colors carefully to emphasize those concepts is worth your time. All right. And, you know, as I get the shadow into the foreground, this is going to make a lot more sense. But I think I'm going to add more detail into the clouds as I go. Probably going to leave it alone for right now, though. And I'll get to work on the plane itself and the dream girl. All right. So let's make some adjustments to her. Once again, goodbye, hair. It's just got to go. As heartbreaking as it is, at the very least, that was a brush. You know, I didn't spend too much time on that particular bit of hair. Okay, let's get her hair going the correct way. What's cool is I'm basically following the same trajectory of layers that I had, you know, in the other illustration. So by defining the order of layers and the purpose of each layer, then it's easier for me now because I basically just follow the rules that I set forward. Like this is the layer where I do her flat colors, right? And then I have a shadow layer, and then I have a bounce light layer, and then I have a color emphasis layer, and then I have a rim light layer. And a line layer, and so on. So that continues. And so I follow the rules that I've already set forward. Yeah, the bed does look a little like a bird. Absolutely. Yeah, there are a lot of aerial motifs in Dreamside. There's a lot of flight reference. And if you were here for one of the other streams this past week, I added a decorative mobile to Sarah's patient room that has paper airplanes. And I was deciding between aerial concepts. So it was either going to be a paper airplane or birds or like a biplane or some other kind of air-based object. We settled on paper airplanes, by the way. So I thank people watching the stream for giving me their feedback on that, because that helped me make a decision. But in that case, it didn't really matter so long as it looked good and it represented the aerial motif. So there are a lot of subtle things that I put in the background of images like that that emphasize the themes of the story. So it's not just decorative, it has something to do with the story itself. That's important to do because it sort of subconsciously tells your reader what the story is about. And flight is a very, very important part of Dreamside. So I want to make sure that people get that sense. And yeah, the smoke coming out of the back of the plane is a rainbow. You know, it does have a spectrum of its own, but it kind of leans a little toward like green through purple. I don't really have um, too many other colors in there because I have to be really careful with the amount of rainbow stuff that I do, because you can only really have so much of that before you start overdoing it. I've explained in the past that when you add something, you also take something away. It's a strange phenomenon, but it really makes perfect sense if you think about it. You can't really add something without taking something away, because everything takes up a certain amount of space. And so if you add something that takes up space, it means that you're preventing something else from taking up that space. So creating illustrations is a balancing act. You can't just add things for the sake of adding them. You can, but you will end up with an imbalanced, confusing mess of a picture. And especially when it comes to telling stories, clarity is really important. I need to make sure that the audience has no trouble following the story. Because if it's too confusing to read a story because you can't quite tell where to look, or there's some sort of some element that is visually confusing, or maybe you have a bit of art that's just a mess, a visual mess, you're making the reader work a little too hard to enjoy the story. And when that happens, people tend to give up because it's not really fun anymore. So you got to make sure that it's engaging and fun for people to experience your stories. Otherwise, they just won't bother. And that's not to say that everything should be a cinch. I mean, there's value in stuff that's a bit challenging to read. It works the mind, and that's good. But I want to make sure that those challenging aspects are themselves fun. I want to make sure that I have the base level clarity that I need in there. And then there's stuff kind of like, the aerial mobile that I described that's a bit more of a symbolic element. It's not accidental that the mobile, which has an aerial reference, is right next to Sarah's patient room window, where she likes to look out and wishes she could fly away. So these are the kinds of subtle things that you can add that are fun for people who are really into the story. They can go and find these extra bits. But I don't want to make it difficult to read. There's like a base level understanding that I want you to have. And if I don't do that the right way, then I've failed my job. I tweeted out yesterday that I want to eventually work toward overlapping campaigns. Because for me, Kickstarter is very much a sort of pre-order store. When you're an independent publisher like Dream Prison, you can't really afford to just take chances on books. You have to see, what has support and what doesn't, and figure out if there's a way for me to establish what the specific printing numbers are. That's really, really helpful for me. If I know, for example, that I sell 1,000 copies of a book, then I can go and print, say, 1,500. So I have some extras that I can sell, because you want to make sure that you have extras, because I do a printing press, an offset press, which is expensive and gets cheaper per unit the more you print. So what I wouldn't want to do, it would be a waste of money if I printed exactly what I needed and then printed another 500 later to sell in the store, because that would be pretty wasteful. Because a print run of 500 hardcover books, for example, is going to be really expensive per book. So if I sell a book for $30 as its list price, just as an example, and it cost me, say, $10 to make each copy of the book, versus say $20 to make if I did a smaller run, then that would mean that every copy of that 500 that I made that cost me $20 per book to make, I would only make $10 for each book compared to $20 per book. So that's part of how I balance the money that the books make. And I have to figure that all out so I can make sure I keep paying the bills. So I can keep making stuff like this. But anyway, the overlapping campaign idea is basically as follows. So since I work by myself, I can only do so much. But more importantly, when I'm printing a book, so like for example with Yucca, there was a certain cutoff point where the creative work was done, right? And that was actually quite a bit before the books were finished, because the printer took quite a bit longer to get stuff done than we initially thought. And so when I was finished with the book, I think it was around, I think all my work was totally finished, including editing for the printer. This is for Ukulele and the Cracklestone. I think it was done probably in October of last year. And then, we didn't really start shipping the finished book until April at the earliest of this year. So all that time was spent with manufacturing. But there's a lot of stuff that with manufacturing where I just kind of have to sit on my hands and get a report from them. Now I can work on stuff, obviously, but it would be better if I could work on a specific project. And so what I'd like to be able to do is do an overlapping campaign where, even though people have not yet received their books for the previous campaign, I'd like to run another campaign as soon as stuff goes to manufacturing for the previous one. Because what that's going to let me do is get right to work on the next book while the previous book is in manufacturing. And that way we can overlap, right? So I'm not just sitting on my hands or spreading stuff out. Because what that basically means is, let's say that for me to do a book that looks like Dreamside, I mean, it really takes quite a long time, even though I simplify the art style a little bit compared to how it used to be. You can see it still takes a long time. But let's just say that it takes me 6 months to get a Dreamside book done. Well, in manufacturing, we're really looking at kind of a minimum of 2 months, but probably closer to 3, maybe even 4 months. So I might spend 6 months working on the book, but that doesn't mean that you'll get it at the end of 6 months. You'll get it at the end of roughly 10 months, right? And that's assuming that shipping doesn't have any problems, right? So for that 4-month period, what if I wait basically until we totally fulfill everybody, what it means is I can't do a campaign more frequently than really about every year. Whereas if I overlap them, I could do 2 a year, roughly. So that would let me move ahead. I would let me make more money, which would also let me potentially get some art help, which would be great, because then it's not just me doing everything. And I have to be able to pay people to do that. So it would be nice if I could get to that point sooner, because the sooner we get to that point, the more books we make. I mean, that's basically what it translates into. The challenge, of course, is that I need backers to trust that they're gonna get both books delivered. So basically it's like, look, people will have backed a campaign, and then I'm asking those people again to back the next one before they've received the book from the previous campaign. So that's kind of a risk. And some people will not be down for that, regardless of what my more fervent supporters will agree to. There are going to be people out there within that backer list who just don't want to do that. They're not willing to take that that risk. So it's a challenge, but I want to see if we can make that a reality, because it just means more books get made. And I think if you're a supporter of Dream Prism, that would be a good thing. You would just get more content made in a shorter amount of time. And it would give me more confidence too, because this is, trust me, on my end, it's kind of freaky, because you don't know if a project that you're working on, you're spending just day after day working on, that does not pay the bills. You don't know if it's going to be successful when it goes to Kickstarter. So it would be very nice if I could do that a little earlier into production, so I could see what people's tastes are, and if they like the direction that I'm taking. Because if they don't, you know, I don't want to work on something that people are just not going to support, because it's not worth anybody's time. And I'd rather redirect my energy towards something that people will like. Because I used a different brush here. This bed was drawn in Clip Studio, and I had what is, in my opinion, not a very good pencil brush. And, you know, I'm kind of redoing it a little bit here with the better pencil that I'm using now. So I hope we can make that happen. I know I'm going to change this green color. It's on the plane. But I'm not going to bother with that yet. All right, let me see. I can do a replace color on this. Now, where did they move it? All right, there used to be a feature to replace color. I don't know where it went. Well, I don't know where the feature went. So I'm just going to pick this. All right. And change the mattress color. I wish I was faster at this. Don't you? Don't you wish Dave was faster? But that just gives us more time to spend together, right? Because isn't spending time together one of the best parts of the day? I think it is. It's much, much more fun doing this with people. It's pretty boring when you're by yourself. I clean up those little bits where I kind of made a few mistakes here and there. And make sure the colors match between the panels. That is important. That's how we make sure that panels are easy to connect. Now, it's less of a problem with Dreamside than it was with Yucca, because Yucca has more of a traditional comic panel structure, whereas Dreamside is more of these freeform illustrations. It's different. So there are larger gaps between the actions. That's a little tricky. Mm-hmm. Hot Bun says, I like the time together. I love spending time with Hot Buns. And Dragmundus says, neato so far. Yeah, it is neato so far. It's pretty neat that we can do this stuff now. So what are some of your goals? Let me know what they are. What are you trying to accomplish? Everyone's trying to do something, so share your thoughts with me. And then I will judge them. I will not judge your thoughts. All right, I'll alpha lock this, and we'll go through the fastest manipulation of her hair. The fastest part of it, anyway. Where I can be really careless. Somebody once told me that the Dream Girl's hair makes them think of taffy. And now I can't stop thinking about it. Kind of want to take a bite of it. Of course, it would be basically impossible for me to keep her hair colors perfectly consistent, because with all of these little tiny details in the flow, to get like the particular color strands in the right place and every part of her hair would just be pointlessly complicated. First of all, nobody would notice, and it would just take ages to do that. Geodude wants to be an animator one day. All right. I went to school for animation. Now I think you can learn it on your own. So however you decide to, I don't know what one day means if you're, in your teens or if you're a bit older, but let me strongly encourage that you look into self-learning. And as useful as things like a degree can be, degrees in my experience are mostly useful if things don't work out with your passion effort. So it's like if you want to be an animator, a degree is not terribly useful for that, because most companies, they really kind of just care about you and your portfolio and what you're capable of doing. And a degree doesn't really prove that. It just shows that you went through a program, but when they need results, and I know that as somebody who owns a company that will hopefully eventually be employing people, eventually, I can tell you that I wouldn't care about your degree. It just wouldn't matter. All that matters is what you can do. So what's great about that is, you load up your YouTube tutorials, and just, there's software that you can get that's pretty inexpensive. You can get free software like Blender if you want to work in 3D or even use some of their 2D features. Isn't it neat how our hair takes on different form as I go? So yeah, don't just my opinion. Don't get suckered into that. Not that art schools are bad. It's just, it can cost a lot of money today. And I think that there's sort of a contract that we had in the past with school. There's an understanding that the degree will be of value to the point that it'll be more than worth the cost of entry. But the cost of entry has raised a lot. I don't know why I'm getting off on a tangent about schools, but as important as college can be, it's important to really weigh your options and say, hey, look, this is a trade-off. It used to be that we had this agreement, so it's going to cost this amount of money, but it's going to be worth it in the end because I'm going to be able to get a job and work in a field that will pay enough money that it will let me cover these costs. But costs are so stratospherically high now, and even for degrees that are kind of more passion degrees, like various art degrees that don't usually lead to jobs that pay an awful lot of money, that really is more passion work, something that is more of a philosophical study, something that you study to improve your mind and improve your life and your experience, but don't necessarily, it's not as easy as jumping into not that it's easy, but I mean, it's not as obvious as the way being a lawyer or a doctor is. It's pretty easy to see how you're going to be able to pay back your loans with that. Anyway, so that's the end of my rant on art schools. But just, you can do it by yourself. And if you're confused, just come and hang out with me, and I'll show you a thing or two. And I won't charge you. Unless you're really mean, then I'll charge you, just to be a jerk. Dragmundus wants to write his own story about traveling through video games. That is very interesting. Traveling through them, as in, like, you live in the games and you're kind of moving from game to game? Looks like Geodude likes the idea. And you want to draw lots of Pokemon. Yeah, of course. Of course. I don't know anything about Pokemon. I mean, I know some things about Pokemon, but I don't know them by name. I always feel like I'm like the 60-year-old parent and or grandparent trying to figure out what my kid or grandkid is talking about. Hot Buns wants to create a bunch of beautiful art and bring your ideas to life. And if you could do that, you're happy, then that's great. That's perfect. That's great because it's so subjective. You're not restricted in that regard. You're not setting difficult rules for yourself. And setting the goal of being happy with what you create, that's a really good goal. I like the word contentment more than happy. Because happy is one of those, I always say that the objective to be happy is kind of, I know what people mean when they say it, but the weird thing about saying I want to be happy is that happy is kind of an elevated state of emotion, right? It's one of those things that you feel temporarily. It's always temporary. Even if you were in a situation where you were very content, you're still going to have unhappy moments. You talk to somebody who is a multi-billionaire, they'll still, they won't be happy all the time. In fact, they probably are very unhappy most of the time because they have too much money. But contentment is really, really good. If you can get to the point where you are content with what you're creating, you will love yourself. And you'll love what you do. It's such great self satisfaction to create something that gives you contentment. So if you can find a process that will lead to that contentment, then I'm extremely happy for you. Because that's just the best. And good for you if you do it. You'll accomplish something that very few people do. Geodude, too late, you're already stuck. Well, that's okay. That's all right. Like I said, I went to art school too. And just get the most out of it. One of the most valuable things that you can get out of school is your, I know this sounds cliche, but it really is the relationships that you form. So make very good relationships while you're in there. You don't have to make relationships with, good friendships with everybody, but just make sure that you're bonding with people in there, because that can lead to people who will help you as you get out into the industry. And I can tell you this, just about every single professional opportunity that I've had in my life, post-college, and I guess pre-college, has been because of a relationship with somebody. It's been because I was friends with somebody and they were willing to help me because they were in a position to do that. So being friendly and considerate and kind to people when you're in these situations leads to reciprocation, because everybody wants to reward people that help them. If you're kind to somebody, they want to go out of their way to reward you. I mean, haven't you ever had a situation with somebody who did something just really, really nice, and you just want to, it's like all you can think about is paying them back? That's the power of reciprocation. It's really powerful. Reciprocity. So make good friends while you're there, even if it seems like you're just not in the mood here and there, because it pays off in time in ways that really aren't super clear at the moment. You never know what job you might want someday, and then you find out that somebody you went to school with is working in there and can put in a good word for you. And that's what companies really prefer. I mean, getting kind of a cold application is kind of scary. There's a lot of investment that goes into finding the right people for a job, because you don't really know what you're getting. You have to assume that people are not exaggerating or lying on the resume. If somebody at the company can say, hey, I can vouch for this person because, I went to school with them and I know that they're good people. I know they're hardworking. I know that they'll bring a lot to the table. Kind of hard when all your classes are remote and no interaction. That is just the worst. That is the worst. Yeah, I feel for you. I really do. I guess the same rule applies. Make the most of what you can do. Try and wherever possible, keep those interactions building. But yeah, that is it's difficult to give advice for stuff like that, because that's such an uncommon thing, dealing with it's like, well, you have this advice that you give typically for years, and then suddenly there's a worldwide pandemic, and the advice doesn't really apply anymore. But it really is kind of the same rules regardless. We just kind of have to figure out a little bit of a different method of operation, and we can adapt. People can get used to just about anything if enough time passes. And take advantage of it. Like, try and spin it around. I like to invert problems. How can you make a problem into a positive? One of the things that when we were in the scary initial time, where there was very little knowledge about this virus, and people were kind of locked in and they didn't really know what was going to happen. And at that time, one thing that would have been good to do is take advantage of that shutdown time to make some personal project. Do something like, all right, my objective is to write a story before the shutdown ends. You know what I mean? And then I guess there's still time to do that, because as far as I know, a lot of stuff is still shut down, depending on where you are in the country or the world. So make the most of it. Turn it into a positive. Hey, Jasper. I'm streaming on multiple sites. Yes. I'm using something called StreamYard, which allows me to set up one location, and then it will automatically export the stream to multiple locations. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you're seeing the same thing as on Facebook and on Twitch. And I'm trying to get Periscope set up as well, but I'm waiting for technical support to get back to me on that because it's pointing to the wrong account when I set it up. So I don't quite know how to handle that because I really want to be live on Periscope because actually the majority of my active following is on Twitter. But I don't want to leave anybody else behind and just only do Twitter. I still kind of prefer YouTube as the primary method of setting these up. And I think most people who follow me are used to that as well, YouTube kind of being the primary source. But it's great that I can broadcast live to Facebook. So if you're on Facebook, you're not missing anything, as opposed to being on the other platforms. Yeah, Geodude, glad to offer some advice. And, if you have any questions or anything, ever need any advice, any help, let me know. I'm here all the time. All the time. Can always count on Dave. I'll be here until I'm not. I'll vanish into a poof of color. When I'm gone, I want to go straight to Dreamside. Let's clean up some of these extra lines that I have in here. This process is not terribly important, but it's all just part of polishing the image. Yeah, Jasper, you can do that. It's very cool. Yeah, I highly recommend setting up with this. Now, if you do use StreamYard and you want to broadcast to multiple platforms, then you have to pay a monthly fee. It's not free. If you just do one, it's free. And I think I'm paying like $20 a month or so for it, which I think is worth it because it lets me, do that, which I think is worth more than $20 a month. And if you do decide to do that, go through me because then you get a discount and then I get a discount through a referral bonus. You emailed me years ago asking about my process and advice. You helped me out a lot. And I want to say thanks. Oh, awesome. I've got to refresh my memory on that. I can't really remember anything that happened past maybe a week ago. So that falls into that category of stuff that I can't quite remember. So yeah, but keep in touch. And, if you were asking about advice, I assume for art and that sort of thing, then I really want to know what you're up to these days and what you've come up with. So make sure you stay in touch and show me what you've been creating since that was a few years ago. I'd love to see what you've done since then. That would be great. All right, I'm going to fill in the shadow area here. Now since I've already filled this in with the base color, I can select that. And then I can fill that with the shadow color so I don't have to carefully go over the line. Because you can see the hair is in a different arrangement than it was. So I want to make sure I've totally covered her because I'm going to pick the color out. I'm going to pick the shadow out of this as needed. All right, and then I'm going to invert the selection So it's going to select everything except the characters, and I can erase around it. So that way I can take out all the stuff that's not part of them. All right, so that what I like about that is it provides some contrast with what's going on behind. Now, this is kind of a bit of a confusing thing that I'm not sure what direction I want to go with this, but I have this basically where they are positionally is the wall where the window is basically right behind Sarah. I mean, it's a little further to the left, but there would be some pretty bright light that would be shining in here. And of course it would affect the bed as well. But I've gotten rid of it in the illustration that's on the right because I wanted to focus on the dream prism. And I use this bounce light for the back. I'll turn everything back on here so you can see what that looks like. But that's basically what this one looks like. So if I added the the window light, it's too much light. Too many light sources, and it would be really visually confusing to look at. But on the left here, I've only got the light source that's behind the bed if I eliminate the bedroom window, the patient room window rather. And so I want to get that back in here. So you can see I've already done it with Sarah. I've got the light painted on her back there, and I'm going to do the same now for this. And it's just one thing that's kind of sticky about it is that the light, since the light's coming from the left, I also have this brighter rim light coming from the left. So it's going to be a little bit difficult to indicate the rim light. So what I'm going to do is cheat a little bit on the position of the light. So instead of coming from the left like this, right, I'm going to have it sort of come from the front middle like that. And then that's going to leave a little bit of darkness here on this side, on her right side, so that I can pick out that rim light behind her like that. And that's going to make it a little bit more interesting. And we'll see if that works. But if I don't do that, then I can't really get the rim light in there. I'll have to put it on the other side of her here, which I can do, but it doesn't really look how I want it to look. You know, because the light source is really coming from over here, you know, behind the plane where the exhaust pipe is. So yeah, so Jasper, thanks for asking. I'm doing these live streams again. I did a few of them back a while ago, but the challenge that I've run into, and I continue to bring this up, and I'm working on this, is that I've had to sort of fight a battle with myself over whether or not I want to do these and kind of show everything that I'm working on, or keep it more secretive, because Dreamside it's a story that I really don't want spoiled. I think the experience of it is better if you don't know everything that's happening. So I'm trying to work that out. It's just that at this moment in time, I'm working on stuff that I really don't think it matters. Because one, this has already existed in the form of the chapter books that I put out on YouTube years ago. And also this is introductory stuff. So it's not really spoiling the very kind of deep secretive elements of the story. And we'll kind of see how to handle those as time passes. I think, who knows? I might, when I'm working on stuff that's a little too secretive, what I might do is just do a live stream that focuses on something else, or maybe I'll show the production process of another story, and get to work on that and kind of split my time up. I think this is something that we'll figure out in time. But the one thing that I know that I need to do more of is communicate with followers. And that's kind of the idea behind doing these. Plus, it's a lot of fun. As I said, it's a lot more fun to do these when you have people hanging out. I used to work in a studio, so surrounded by people all the time. And I used to think, oh, I'd really prefer to be by myself because you kind of get sick of being around people all the time. But then when I'm working by myself, it's kind of, I'm by myself all the time working on this stuff. And so it's, a middle ground would be nice. But it's kind of all or nothing. You're either at a studio and you're surrounded by people all the time, or you're working by yourself all the time. So I'm roughing this right now. This is not very refined, but it's good enough to just rough in, and then I'll kind of figure out where I need to edit. And see how adding this little bit of light like this, it helps us see the shape of things. It picks it out of the darkness, It picks it out of the flatness that it had before, because we're now seeing how things are formed, like where things are like a rounded cylinder and where things are kind of a flatter edge. Like this is sort of a flatter edge right here. And this thing right here, it's got kind of a hard edge. See what I mean? But this is more of a cylinder. I've got to remind myself that you don't exactly know what I'm talking about unless I can make it very clear what I'm drawing. So that's unfortunately a byproduct of doing the screen share rather than, a camera of me actually drawing, which is something I might consider doing in the future. But we're figuring this out as we go, right? Jasper saw the 3D models of my characters. I can use this Clip Studio's base for illustration. Told me you had them commissioned. That actually inspired me to go to school and learn how to make 3D characters for games and animation. Really? Well, that's awesome. Very, very cool. Yeah, well, how is it? Are you in school now? I should rephrase that question. Are you sitting in front of your school, sitting in front of your computer, not going to school? It's kind of funny with the shutdowns. It's kind of been like you're sort of learning on your own, because there's a lot of effort that has to, a lot of self motivation. I think that would have to go into that, right? Because it's a little, you're not locked in a physical location where you just kind of have to go there, and so you're there incidentally. I think in this case, it's probably a little trickier, right? To kind of find that motivation to really turn on the computer and pay attention to the classes and stuff, right? Because you got a lot of things that could distract you. I imagine that's pretty tough. Graduated in December and I'm looking for work through the pandemic. Oh, bad timing. Yeah, bad timing. But, opportunities continue to exist and companies are adjusting, they have to. So there is a greater amount of interest in, getting people to work from a distance, which is good because it can be a little tricky to relocate. Hot Buns wants to find different people to draw around. So I think you draw around the wrong people. Too many want to discourage and only point out flaws. Tips are fine, but it's just rude to only talk about flaws, especially when the art is pretty nice. Yeah, right. Because here's a funny thing. I heard a talk by a Disney Imagineer who works in their theme park design, and he's basically, his job is to brainstorm new ideas for theme park editions. And he was explaining that at least within his department, they have what they call a yes and system that they use, where you're not allowed to say any negatives. There's only positives. And what you do is you're just not allowed to say negatives. So the idea behind it is, regardless of how bad an idea might be, you have to bounce off of it and then figure out how to improve it in real time. And there's a logic behind this. And the logic is that when people are hit with negativity for creative contributions, so like if you contribute a creative idea and you're shut down, then it takes time for you to sort of emotionally recover from that. And it actually hinders your creative ability. So if you can see the opposite of this, where if you do something that's really good and it's encouraged, you kind of feel motivated to do a lot more of it. And what ends up happening with what at least what he was explaining is this translated into an insane amount of productivity for them. Because when everybody stays positive, the ideas keep flowing very quickly. And so it was far more beneficial for them to use this yes and concept. So what I would say is, and just through my own experience as well, is negativity, too much negativity. Now, I want to separate this from critique because that's different. Okay. But if you're just feeling like you're being, I'm going to say bullied, the problem with that is, other than it just making you feel miserable, is that it's actually hindering your creative abilities. Because you're not feeling as free to experiment because you're being pressured. So when that happens, you're actually hurting your artistic growth. So I would say in that case, better to be around nobody than be around anybody who's doing that. And if people kind of take that attitude that it's if they're making you feel badly about what you're making, it's there's a time for critique and there's a time for people to just kind of leave you alone to experiment. Because it's kind of like if you catch somebody drawing something right, in say it's in the halfway point, right? It's not that far into it. It's not the right time to show it off, right? Somebody might come in and say, "Oh, that looks bad," but that's because you haven't made enough progress on it yet. And if they come in and they insult it, it might make it hard for you to ever reach that point. So the irony is, they can turn into real life that which they're misunderstanding as they look at something. And sometimes people can just be mean. If people, when people get, we'll say, jealous, that's then the nasty stuff tends to come out, and that can be very irritating to deal with. Because if you're the type of person who just wants to create and you have people kind of coming after you, that's not really a good use of your time. So don't be affected by that. But here's the other thing too, is try and put that in perspective too, because if somebody bothers you by doing that, they're kind of double winning. If you not only are irritated at the moment, but you also kind of let that bake into your mind. But just tell yourself that it's actually, it's not only is it wrong, but it's 100% wrong. Like, it's not even worth your time to consider that they have a point. You know, it's kind of like, and here's the funny thing, they might actually be correct about the quality of something. Like, somebody might come forward and say, you know, it's just not very good. But the problem is, like what I've been trying to say, and I keep kind of repeating myself because I don't feel like I've gotten my point out, is that you will fulfill, I guess, their what they're making fun of you for by dwelling on it like that, you know. And you have to learn to differentiate that from critique. Like, healthy critique would be something like, you know, I make books for a living now, right? So that means that I'm counting on people to support what I'm doing. But since it's entertainment, I have to make something that people want. Otherwise, they're not going to support it, right? like who spends money on entertainment related stuff that is not entertaining for them? So asking people, you know, some people, and of course, you know, if you go out in the real world and you're dealing with a situation where you have to produce, it's like some people will not be polite because they really have they don't feel any incentive to be polite. I guess they're just telling you what they want. And some people might say that something that I do is just terrible. And I try not to take it personally in that regard. But if these are your friends, if they're people that you're around and they're making you feel miserable, then yeah, don't draw around those people. It'll improve your life. Yeah, and remember that even if everybody makes terrible art on occasion. I have times when no matter how often I've drawn these characters, I'll make versions of them where they just look ridiculous. Like I'm like, I don't understand it. Just the other day I was saying that I was frustrated because I've drawn these characters so often, but I was really struggling with an illustration. And it just didn't make sense to me. It's like, why am I struggling with these characters I've drawn so many times? It affects everybody, but if you dwell on it, you'll make worse art out of it. Just, you know, you have to learn to let it rub off you and just continue on something else. Because as soon as you find something that is working, you're going to feel like $1,000,000, because that's what happens to artists. We feel kind of miserable until we find that thing that is suddenly really working. You know, I mean, you've had that experience, right? When you just love something that you made. So try and find those opportunities to bring that stuff out. And don't be discouraged by other people. That's not worth your time. Yeah, I agree with Jasper. That's a good point. It's been tricky, but you can never stop making art. Criticism should be given when asked. No need for them to be overtly rude. Yeah, I agree. I agree. At the same time, it's, you know, and to play devil's advocate with it, you can turn bad feedback into a strength. If somebody comes to you and says something mean, you can take that as an opportunity to say, all right, I can't control what this person, I can't control their attitude, but I can absorb the pain of this interaction and let it make me stronger. You know, so that next time when it happens, it doesn't sting quite as much, right? And so everything can be spun into something that is a positive. And it's very healthy, I think, as an artist to be able to do that. You know, things, we become more resilient with nastiness. You know, we become more resilient to other nastiness, and that can really help us deal with that in the future, even if it really stinks in the moment. But that none of that changes what I was saying. That doesn't mean you shouldn't take active steps to get away from situations that are, you know, not bringing you a good outcome. Yeah. If you find that you're paying respect to other people and they're just not reciprocating, they're not worth your time. And put it in contrast. There are so many artists out there who will not give you that negative experience. And it's very possible that you're around people that are just not the right mix for you. You know, this is not your artist community, you know. Sometimes it's good to spend time around people who are not artists, because a lot of artists are very neurotic. A lot of artists are very, very emotional. It's just comes with the territory. And some of the most incredible artists are the most difficult to be around. I actually don't spend that much time around artists, which I think is one of the reasons I'm a bit happier. Because I can create stuff that people will enjoy, and it doesn't include the kind of hyper criticism that I get from artists. Because another problem with being around artists is artists always want everyone to love their art, right? I mean, that's kind of what we want, right? The problem is that when you're only around artists, everybody kind of wants the same thing. You know, they want you to admire their art, and you want them to admire your art, and no one is really impressed with anybody because everybody can kind of do the same thing. Better, much, much better is to go and spend some time with people who appreciate what you do, because they can't really do what you do. You know, it's a lot more fun, you know, to sit down with, you know, a kid who's learning how to draw and really, you know, admires artistic ability, you know, and is not going to say, oh, that's a cliche art style that you chose or something like that's never going to come from a 10-year-old. You know what I mean? It's a lot more fun to spend time around people like that. So give me a class of kids over a cynical group of extremely experienced artists who have been working in the industry a long time. Also, let's never forget that this is supposed to be fun. I mean, I know a lot of artists think that what they do is so incredibly important and noble, you know, because we're part of the philosopher group, you know, very important. But it's not really. It's important to it can make people's lives better. But remember, if that's true, if the goal is to make people's lives better, then no point in being insulting to the people who are closest to you. Kind of goes against the philosophy, doesn't it? This is why I love your videos and streams. It helps so much with my art-related problems. Well, that is great, and I would say that that's reciprocated, okay? Because when I do streams like this, I get to talk with people like you know, who are nice and they're complimentary, and you encourage what I'm doing as well. So that's part of what makes these so much fun. And you know what's really cool is, listen, I can tell you that there is nothing all that special about me as an artist. All right, like if I show you the art that I produced as a kid, it's, you know, it's not going to blow your mind. And it's just a matter of spending the time. And what's really cool about that is I like doing these streams because I like showing people that anybody can do this. Even if it seems like I do something that might be a little bit, we'll say, experienced, it's really just because I've done it a lot, you know, and like a lot. And if you knew how much time I had spent on practicing, it would, you know, it would make perfect sense. It would define it all. So the really good news, this is the good news, is that you can do it. Like everything that you want to do artistically can be done. It's just a matter of whether or not it's worth the time and effort. That's really it. You know, because this stuff does cost a lot. It costs a lot, and I don't mean money. It takes a lot of your energy. You'll have, you know, emotional days that you just feel miserable because things are not coming out the way that you want. You'll get angry with people close to you because you're just in a bad mood because something didn't come out artistically the way that you want it to. There are some serious costs that come with doing this professionally or really in any capacity that involves a serious commitment. So there are costs associated with it. For me, I think it's worth it. A lot of people, when they're younger, they think they're going to think it's worth it, and then before they're too old, they say, you know what, this is kind of more unpleasant than it is pleasant. I started doing this because I wanted to have fun, or I wanted to make something really cool, or because I love video games. I want to make video games, or comic books or whatever. And the unpleasant parts set in, and it becomes not so much fun. So just bear in mind. But the good news is that you can do it. The bad news is that it's not that frequent that you should. And if that sounds discouraging, then I think you're reading what I'm saying the wrong way. I think it's actually quite encouraging. You can do it. So there's nothing. You'll be amazed what you can accomplish. Like, there are things that you'll say, like, oh, I see other people doing, or maybe there's artists that you really admire out there who are doing incredible things. But again, look at their progress. Try and find out what they were drawing when they were 15. And maybe some of them are prodigies, but very few actually are. Most of them just decide, they just weighed it and they said, this is worth the pain, because there will be pain. This is worth the suffering here and there. And, it's not that bad. We could be living in the year 1400 and have to deal with a very different world. We can sit and draw pictures. That's not that bad, right? But, there are some deceptive ways that it messes with your mind. So just bear that in mind. But like I said, good news is you can do it. Find it hard not to be around other artists. Otherwise, you can't talk about your passions and what you love. You can talk about art, but I never feel that they are understanding. Well, yeah, I mean, and that's the thing too, is artists can sometimes be extremely valuable because they can understand concepts that you might present that other people may not quite so clearly. And so it's really just a matter of finding what works for you, because everybody's a little bit different. I like being around people when I'm working, but that doesn't mean I necessarily like working directly with other artists. And it's not that I don't like working with other artists. It's that I think in my case, it's more that I have ideas that I want to get out, and I want to do them as true to the idea that I have in my head as possible. And that's a little harder to do when I'm on a team project, because everybody, of course, has their own ideas of what they want the project to become. So Dreamside, for example, is what it is because it's just me. If other people were involved, there would be changes. And the thing is, those changes may be for the better. But it wouldn't be the same thing. It's not a matter of better or worse. It's just that in order for this thing that I really want to exist, the way that I want it, I have to just do it myself. It's not a lack of faith, with other artists. It's just that everyone's going to have their own vision. And I would rather, if I was going to work with somebody, I would want to work on something that we developed together. Something that was not like my original story that I'm trying to communicate to another artist why it's important, if that makes sense. All right, I've got to get a little bit of that shadow on the far side of her. I really want to get that rim light in there. This is a total cheat, but I don't think anyone's going to notice or care. And that's really all that matters. Do you care? Because if it makes it more visually appealing, that's better, as long as it doesn't ruin anything. It doesn't break any rules that are important. Yeah, see, a certain amount of effort is required here, but I think that the Dream Girl has the expression I want her to have, which is that sense of just, of course the bed is going to turn into a plane. Of course there's going to be a giant smoke cloud behind this. There's no thought or concern about the medical staff that might come running into the room or wonder what this event is that's occurring. It doesn't matter. All that matters to the Dream Girl right now is Sarah and what she thinks about what's happening. All right, let me get that rim light in here. All right, yeah, so we don't have this light because this is a unique light just to that panel. This is my rim light here. So I've got to get that color. Turn off everything. Go back to normal and turn up the max. This way I can just pick the color, get as close as possible. All right, let's see what damage I can do here with this. All right, rim light. This is a pretty delicate process. So I don't want to go too far into her head. Adding this purple color, it's a very fantastical element, because it's an unnatural color to have, especially in this circumstance. It gives kind of a weirdly epic feel. It lets you know that something incredible is happening. Because this light is not natural. Not a purple light like this. It's not sunlight. It's not light in the room. No, this is something different. Colors have that ability to give us a really incredible sense of the kind of magical energy that you're trying to convey. Jasper, how big is the resolution, the illustration you're working on? How big do you typically work on? Well, I actually have the resolution of these. I got to crop and resize. See if that tells me. No, it doesn't. I think if I go to the gallery, I can check it. Oh, here it is. It's 5900 by 3900. So this actually has the two pages. So it has the left and right. So I do them together because there's a crossover. That over the border, the images will actually cross over. So it's kind of double what I would normally need to work with because I'm showing both pages. However, I did actually have the resolution from the original Dreamside files, which were just overkill. And the problem is they were causing a lot of slowdown, even with very powerful equipment. It's just, I was working with so many layers, and it was kind of a nightmare to work with. So I didn't need the resolution, so I cut it out. And the thing is, if you have enough resolution, you can use certain types of software that can blow up the resolution a little bit if need be. Like if you were going to make a poster print or something, and you were worried that you weren't making it at a high enough resolution. It's like if it's, like this is plenty of a resolution detail, right? Because if I need to blow this up, then the software that I can use will do a good enough job with it. The problem is that if it's very low resolution, those kind of blow up software programs, they need a lot to work with in order to do a good job. So I just had to make sure that I had enough to play with. So that's my reason for being okay with lowering the resolution. Plus, if I wanted to work on the iPad, I had no choice. There was just no way to do these at the full resolution as I had it, because Procreate just couldn't open the file. Like it might have been able to open the file, but I would only be able to do like 3 layers. So it just wouldn't work, because I need a lot more than that, as you can see. You just want to say thanks again before you head out. I'm a big fan of your work, so I'm really happy to see you streaming. Fantastic. Yes, well, yeah, we're going to be doing these pretty much regularly now, and I'll just kind of keep them going as long as people are interested. I'm leading into the Kickstarter campaign for Dreamside finally, so I'll be able to get an actual physical book finally, which I think it's about time for. So yeah, come back and see us again. I think I want the cloud to fade out a bit on the right. Now, I do actually have a layer here that I use to define the border. So I think I might take advantage of that here. Actually, I might want to do that down here. All right, I'm out of layers. So I've got to make a decision here. All right, I'll get rid of this reference. And I'm using white because it'll go back to the page white. That also helps bring attention to the Dream Girl's hair here. Pops out her hair a little bit. You see how that helps with that? We'll probably do the same with the ivy pole once I get to that. All right, got to keep working with the, where were we here? The rim light. Okay, I'm going to do something kind of fun here. This is, again, a cheat, but I'm going to have the right side of the plane start to receive a bit of that purple, as though the smoke is kind of filling the ambient space of the room. I'll jump back and forth between the regular shadow as well. All right, got to refine some of this shadow stuff I did that's pretty messy. It's worth it to take the time and shape the stuff out more accurately. Just feel out the shapes. Thanks, Dragman. Appreciate it. Yeah, that's lighting is really kind of everything. See how I do a little bit of a harder edge toward the top here? Because it's kind of pinched in. It gives it the impression that the shape of the panel, you can tell that there's a little bit of a harder pinch up here. There's a harder edge. And then as it goes down, it kind of softens. So that helps communicate the shape of the object without, drawing it with a line. Great to see you, Dragmundus. Thanks for coming. See you next time. All right, I think I'm going to try and get some of that some of that purple color on the. I'm just going to go ahead and do this on the opposite side because I want to get some bounce light where it's a little bit, there's kind of some light color coming in from the right side just to contrast with that more significant light that's coming in from the left. What are we thinking so far? I think it's beginning to work. If you think it looks awesome, then good. I think it looks awesome. And then I know I'm on the right track. I think I'm going to add more light to the cloud now because as I'm refining the lighting, I need to get an idea of how bright that's going to be. All right, let's get some of that bounce purple light on Sarah, the side of her that's facing it. You're allowed to be able to color digitally like this one day. Try and practice, but digital is too complicated even just to draw. I'd rather just use good old pencil and paper. Yeah, that's fine. I only use digital art because for the project I'm working on, it helps me get the result I need the most quickly and the most accurately. But that's what I'm trying to do. If your objective is just to create art, I might be using a different tool set. It just depends on what you're trying to do. So there's nothing wrong with using different tools. And the same basic rules apply as you use different tools. It's just a matter of getting used to the particulars of each one. If you try and approach a watercolor painting the same way that I am here, then you're not going to have much luck because it's a different medium. And it has different behaviors. If you do draw digitally, use Manga Studio 4. Ooh, that's going back a ways. Coloring is awful on it, but the drawing pens are amazing. Even better than Clip Studio's pen to me. Yeah, there was a time when I really liked the Manga Studio 4, Clip Studio 4 pencil brush. There was a way that the tools worked in that was different than how they operate since. And it did take some adjustment to get used to the newer Clip Studio style brushes. But yeah, if that is your only coloring tool, then it is pretty limited. I can definitely see why that wouldn't be too appealing for you. Yeah, at some point, try giving Procreate a try, because it is the most similar, in my opinion. The overall experience is the most similar to traditional media. I think people who are coming from being very comfortable with traditional media will have the easiest time with digital art, and so far with Procreate, I think that's the one that I've tried that's gotten the closest result. Because one of the things that Procreate does really well is it eliminates a lot of the overt complexity that's just not needed for people who just kind of want to think like a traditional artist. Because with a traditional art, project, you're not, you're not going in and selecting a bunch of menu options and dealing with layers and all of that. You just have a piece of paper, and then you have certain techniques that you can use with different mediums. But it's different. It's a different approach. And while Procreate does have a number of those very digital features, I think it provides the quickest adjustment to people who just think about things in terms of putting their art on a flat piece of paper. All right, I've got to fix this desk because I imported the desk. This is one of the, not the desk, but the nightstand. This is a holdover from the old art, and I had merged the shadows with it. So the desk itself is not following the rules of my current drawing style. So I gotta make a few changes here. Although I did have the right idea in terms of vignetting toward white like this, because this is something that I'm doing pretty commonly now for stuff that's not quite as important as the main subject. I'll kind of do this fade to white like this. Hey there, Brian Barr. 5X, yes. This is the new Procreate. Although, to be honest, I haven't been making too many changes to this with the new features, but I'm learning as I go. Yeah, even though this is a pretty small drawing, it's still going to be really important because it's a face. It attracts the eye. So I've got to spend the time needed to get it right. What are we thinking, folks? There's still a number of things I need to do here. I definitely need to lighten this IV pole and do some bounce light on that. But I think I might take a break from it for a little while, just because it's good to do that so that you can refresh your mind on something. Because after you've been staring at it for a long time, it can be a little tricky to know what still has to be done. Because you've been staring at it for so long. And usually when I come back to it with a fresh eye, then I do a better job. And I'll, get a few ideas in the midterm. I think one thing I was kind of thinking of adding to this is some like little glowy lights and things that could go throughout the plane. I think I originally didn't want to do that because I didn't want to have to draw that a million times. But, the bed plane is not in that much of the book, so it might be worth it. So yeah, I'll do some thinking on that and see what else needs to be done with this. But anyway, that's what we did today. So not bad, huh? Not bad. Okay, cool. Well, thank you for coming as always. And I hope to see you in the next stream. In the meantime, make sure you're making some cool stuff, whether it's your artwork or anything else that you're trying to do. It's all doable. All right? Okay, see you soon.